Tishman Spire project is a Tishman Spire project in San Francisco. And that, oh, sorry, I think we've lost that slide. And this is actually the image on the right is pulled from Foursquare. This isn't a rendering. The one on the left, the 105, is still in construction, so this is a rendering. But on the right, it just really shows how this can be a space for people to come and sit and gather, whether they're tenants, whether they're members of the community, whether they're students nearby, whether they're members of the life science community that are, having meetings in Center City and coming down from University City. So really just a vibrant space where I view activity at the ground floor is always good activity.
Yeah, and that pedestrian activation and warm and welcoming environment, is so important. And I will say, just to change gears here on this slide a little bit, obviously the streetscape is critical. Obviously, how the building is perceived and preserved, the existing buildings are preserved at the streetscape are critical. But of course, we're also very concerned with how the building fits into its context, how it meets the sky, and how the massing feels. And so the slide that's up on the screen now, it really describes a series of operations, starting in the upper left, the existing context, the existing buildings, moving to diagram number 2. This is an initial overbuild. This was the idea if we just, or if someone had just come to the site and wanted to just build out to the full extent of the property lines, no real setbacks for building A and building B, no real sense of framing or scale, this is what it would be. Diagram number 3, you see, we start to just craft how we frame the existing buildings, create elevated outdoor terraces, activate not just the streetscape, but also some mid-level elements on the building, and bring some greening to the building higher up as well as lower, and creating, not just places for people, but also habitat, for birds, especially along the river. Number 4, diagram there, this is a response to what we saw as a desire, once again, to highlight and contextualize and frame the existing buildings, but also lighten the sense of the overbuild, the element that is over those buildings, by pinching in at the center points. So the building, as you move down Market, as you move to the south on 23rd or to the north on 23rd, you're seeing the building shift and change and move in and out of field of plane over the existing buildings in a way that we think will help lighten and give that building a little bit of it's a subtle move, but we think it's a move that will create a dynamic facade that is also has a diminished presence from the street. And then diagram number 5, this was really important, was how do we not only screen some of the equipment that might be up on the roof in an efficient way, but also meet the sky in a dynamic way. So what we've done is we've actually taken each of those 4 corners and pulled them up. So the building is moving not just in the XY axis or the X axis, but also in the Y axis. And then through some of the moves we've made, in the facade, really highlighting those corners, creating glassier corners so that not only views out of the building, but also, during various times of day, views into the building and activation of those corners so they feel lively and they feel active.
And one of the challenges I think that, that KT has really responded well to is balancing the programmatic needs of a life science building. A life science commercial building wants to have large, clean, open floor plates, and doing so on a site with existing buildings below, and how to do that in an artful way that helps the new build above mesh with the existing below. And some of these slight but very poignant moves of pinching in the mass, raising the new build and stepping back at these terraces really gives the space and respect to the existing brick building and white terracotta building below that really help emphasize it. And I'm obviously partial, I think really developed a very nice design overall.
Now we're going to see the next slide. It's going to show us what you're talking about. Yes.
Yes, the white tablecloth. Yeah, it's so stepping back, you saw the elevational view of the lower buildings before, but this is stepping back and seeing the full elevation on Market Street. I'll get into in a moment what we're doing with the facade. Obviously, you're seeing some elements that are glass and some elements that are not glass, that are vertical. We'll touch on those in a moment. But just on this image alone, I think it's important just to once again go back to the strategy of how we are framing the existing buildings, setting back the terrace on the 4th floor and the 5th floor over Building A and Building B, and then stepping back the element to the west as well. So it's not right up on the sidewalk. And as you can see, it's hard to make out here, but our plan right now is to introduce a planting bed in that location. So there is greenscape. There is the well down to the lower level between the building, the existing building and 2400 Market. And creating a sense of greenery there and a sense of arrival and really an address for this building. Moving on to the next slide.
Wait, before you do that, John, we had a question in chat about how will the Market Street sidewalk elevations, which are currently pretty busted up, be corrected?
A great question. A real fun and interesting aspect of this project is the grade change, not just along Market Street, but actually as you move down 23rd Street and down Ludlow as well. It's about 20 feet of overall grade change. We're actually utilizing the natural entry location for the middle building. So we're not changing any of the grading of the sidewalk. We're utilizing that moment when our ground floor for the brick building and the terracotta building are coincident with the sidewalk of Market Street so that we can have a unified ground floor while Market Street remains, the natural grade of Market Street remains intact. And of course, all sidewalks will be, completely ripped out and replaced with new sidewalks and green elements as well as a part of the construction process.
I would just to highlight when John says we're using the existing grade, we're following the grade elevations where they are. We're certainly smoothing out the sidewalk as it is today. If you've walked on it frequently like I have, it's in rough shape. So the plan is to follow that natural grade and actually smooth everything out and really create for a nice pedestrian environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
While we're on that, there was a question about whether you've communicated with Otis about the bike lane proposals on Market Street.
Yes, we're working, not only have we communicated, we're working with those proposals, we're working with the future planning for Market Street for bike lanes, and there's an interchange, bus interchange that is scheduled for there as well. So that is all part of the design that we've been working on with our civil engineer, Langen, who is well known and well experienced in Philadelphia as well. And we're in communications with Streets and SEPTA as a part of the process as well.
And I do note that from the plans that we worked on, that there's substantial bicycle parking in the garage because we think there'll be a lot of bicycle traffic to the building.
Yeah, we actually bicycle traffic is and accommodating cyclists and runners and so forth. We have part of our amenity program. We've planned for shower and locker rooms, and we have significant bike storage in the lower level where there's parking as well. But a lot of bike storage because it is important to us, and we think it's something that's only going to be more in demand as things move forward.
So there are some other questions. I think we only have 2 or 3 more slides. So why don't we get through these and then we can pause and address every question. Want to just pause for a second first on the 2 existing buildings and just talk a little bit more about exactly what we're going to do. Obviously, the building at the corner of 23rd and Market was constructed in 1931. It was a warehouse for the Auto Car Corporation, which then moved out to Ardmore and is actually still in existence and is down, I believe, in Georgia. It was most recently the the Culinary Arts Building for the Art Institute of Philadelphia. We believe operations ceased around 2019, and it's been empty since. When this building opens, our plan is to fully restore the masonry. One of the interesting things that we discovered very early on was that there was a sort of fictive late breaking addition at the lower level that added a sill to those lower level windows. We're actually going to restore it to the original elevation level of those sills, which is very exciting, along with restoring the character of those 3/3 windows in the fenestration bays on that building. Very excited about that. And then of course just cleaning up the sidewalk, adding street trees, and introducing landscape. And of course, it goes without saying that having those windows on the street means putting activity and putting science on display in a way that is going to be really energizing for this corner in a way that we're really excited about.
And let me ask a couple of questions right there. One of the people asked whether these is going to be lab space and other type of similar uses rather than pure solely office space as we go forward. And another person asked, have you started conversations with potential tenants?
We've had some early conversations with potential tenants. We actually haven't publicly announced the project yet, so that's limited our sort of full marketing campaign. But yes, this is a life science building, so it'll be mixed of R&D lab as well as office, similar to what you're seeing in a lot of the planned life science buildings, ground up developments in University City and the Navy Yard and so forth.
And will there be gene work and animal work and the like, or is it more theoretical? That was another question.
It's more theoretical. A lot is driven, we're going to build it on spec and lease the building out to potential users. It's hard to say right now what exactly that science will be and what those potential users will be, but it will be R&D lab and office.
And I think there's one more slide, which I interrupted.
That's no problem. If you want to advance, please, Ryan. The middle building, the Terracotta building, originally built as a warehouse and showroom for the Locomobile Corporation, which actually ceased to exist, I believe, in the early 1920s, and made very fine cars, very interesting, beautiful cars. It was most recently a mixed-use building that was anchored by the Facade Heating Oil Company, which again we believe operations ceased around 2019. And then for this building, we really want to bring it back to its glory. We have our work cut out for us. The original terracotta facade has been painted over several times. It's in there's a lot of spalling and cracking. The sills have been tarred over with mastic. Practically speaking, through consultation with preservationists and with contractors, the best approach here is likely going to be carefully deconstructing the facade, tagging all the pieces, warehousing it, and then reassembling it as a part of the new construction process, prior to the opening of the building. Another big part of that will be installing new windows that restore it to the spirit of the 1911 originals. You'll see the ones in the middle there. A little bit of, looks like maybe vintage to the late 70s or early 80s, black aluminum mullions, bringing it back to the original fenestration, the original scale and grace and elegance of those floor slab cover spandrel panels. And then of course, adding in new sidewalk and street trees. And I think it's so exciting that we can actually turn this building and this location into the entrance, the primary entrance, and really activate not just that bay, but as you saw in the ground floor plan, all three structures in a way that feels cohesive and singular and lively and energetic. So just looking at the view down Market Street to the east, you can see how those two buildings are framed. You can see how that pinch in the inflection point pulls the facade back from those buildings, but also how we are creating a corner that does call out and does pull activity over from across the river, visible from 30th Street Station, bringing people across the river to this life sciences hub right here, at 23rd and Market. Next slide, please, Ryan. So just to talk very quickly about the facade, forgive the dry drawings here, but we wanted to just show those verticals that we have up on the screen that have a kind of like champagne warm gray color to them. The intent isn't that those are just blank flat panels. The intent is that those actually have a shape and a craft to them as well. And one thing we used as a little bit of a jumping off point was, you see in the neighborhood, you see these kinds of textured architectural elements on lots of the older buildings, especially the old industrial buildings. And they oftentimes actually happen on those vertical piers. And one of the ones that really resonated and we felt was a great opportunity to do something contemporary, but with a nod to history, was the idea of flutes on a column. And you see these all over the city on old industrial buildings, these fluted columns. And so what we've done here is we've actually created essentially a flute that will be the typical vertical opaque component of the building. We're going to do it out of metal, and we'll show you an example of that on the next slide. But what you're seeing on the two images to the left and to the right there, if you go back real quick, Ryan, is essentially how we're going to meet the top of the building and the bottom of the building. So these will be articulated. They won't just be put up on the building in an extrusion. They'll be articulated at the top and the bottom in a way that will feel purposeful and bespoke. Next slide, please, Ryan. And then, when we're considering materials and materiality, we're thinking of glass that is high performance, that will hit the building's target of LEED Gold, but is not highly reflective. Glass that will allow views in, views out, and not create something that is too overly reflective on this corridor of Market Street. And then that metal panel piece you see above there, that is a metal panel that has been painted. It's a 3-coat, high durability, high performance metal paint. And what you can see is those 3 coats, the base coat and the color coat, and then the top coat is a mica coat. And what that does is that gives it specularity, so that as you look at it dead on, it has one color, and then at the 2 angles of incident and the way the light will hit it will create something that doesn't just feel flat, and with the curvature and the shape of those flutes will feel dynamic and will feel highly appropriate and premium for the site. I also just want to say it works really well with the existing buildings. This is right at the junction point between the existing building at 2300 and the terracotta building. You can see how that metal works so well with the brick color, with that granite base. And then, of course, the terracotta has been painted over, but from our sort of initial investigations, we actually think that was a slightly warmer shade of white as well, that we would like to restore that to.
And one thing I would just want to highlight, unfortunately, obviously we had to move to virtual tonight, but we were planning to bring a physical sample of the metal with us, because a lot of times in imagery, depending on what the contrast of your computer screen is, may not do it justice. We've chosen this John described as a champagne-y warm gray color. We feel that's a very timeless color. Also with the vertical flute, a very timeless form that's respectable of the existing buildings around, not just the ones below it. And then also we looked at a number of different color options. This allows it not to sort of blend in as a big, dark, heavy new build, but also not so light that it doesn't that it washes out the existing white terracotta building. So that color is actually at a nice tone and allows the terracotta building below to continue to stand out, which we find is very impactful.
So Joe and John, we're going to have to wrap up. This has been a really, really good presentation. We have lots of community members here. I count at least 20 people who are not on the board who have joined principally to look at this. There was a question about harmony between the proposed fenestration and the original fenestration, and I believe that was extensively discussed with the Preservation Alliance during our meetings, and they blessed the changes you had to make to accommodate the floor stuff and to respect the greatest extent possible the historic fenestration. I see no other questions in the chat, and we're going to have to move on, but we will be taking this up in a motion in the business part of the meeting to proceed with the community benefits agreement. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this building, this rendering will be Exhibit A to the community benefits agreement. This is the building that they are going to commit to build with all the details that they have shown and talked to you about. And for those of you, several of you are here from the 23rd, South 23rd condominium, the community benefits agreement, which we will publish to you. And we will, it deals extensively with construction and minimizing construction impacts, as well as traffic and a lot of other stuff that is addressed thoroughly throughout there. There's a question about timetable and occupancy. When do you guys want to break ground, and when do you think you'll be ready to lease?
Sure. So we are looking to begin construction activities on site this year, and really start with vertical construction towards the end of this year, with the goal of completion in 2024. So we call it, first day of occupancy, opening up the doors towards the second half of 2024.
Thank you, Joe, and your team, and thank you, the architects. I will speak for the task force, who is very, very pleased with how you listened and how well this building reflects the comments. It speaks to how well CCRA and its development members have able to work together for the benefit of the community.
Excellent.
Every